Yeah, no, I have to say that for me, I really cannot point to any place where I would have said I would want to become a scientist. When I was in high school, I think I was rather unfamiliar with the concept of a scientist. And actually for a long time, I guess until I became a scientist, I was unfamiliar with the concept of a scientist. I think it's more that I was always very strongly interested in something.
Okay, so I wanted to be a mathematician, but then it was in secondary school. I had this idea that I'm going to be a great mathematician, but then I learned that mathematics is very hard in the sense that the research takes a long time and you cannot really publish. And I was lucky to meet a guy who was a physicist at the Polytechnic in Gdańsk, who just told me that mathematicians have actually a boring life. So it's better to be a physicist. And then at the university, actually, I fell in love with quantum mechanics because it's a very cool theory in the sense that it's full of paradoxes that are very counterintuitive, and this is what makes it very interesting.
There are a couple of people who definitely inspired me. I mean, starting with MacGyver. I think MacGyver is one of the most easy ways for children to get contact with science. It's cool, it works, and it's just fascinating what you can do with the world once you understand physics and chemistry. And then you read some more of the popular science books and you find out what a struggle it was for the first people in history to develop this formalism of science. I think doing science in the early days was much more difficult than it is nowadays. And you did not even know that there are fundamental laws of physics you can find. So these people and their inspiration to find a common cause in this strange world certainly inspires me to continue with my research.
When I was young, one of my favorite scientists was actually Michael Faraday. I like him for two reasons. One is that he didn't have a degree in science, at least. He was essentially a lab technician, but he was doing very good science. I particularly admire people who can do both experiment and theory, because experiment is something I could not do very well.
So first was, of course, Albert Einstein. But then, of course, after that, I think that in the end it was Richard Feynman who was an inspiration to me. He was really great physicist, and also he was excellent in making physics something really exciting. But then, after some time, also I started to notice that there were people who were living in the shadows of this, kind of flashy physicists like, Einstein and Feynman. But in the end, in science, I think to have role models is not a good idea, because in the end, everybody's wrong. This is how progress is made in science. There is this internal verification of theories, and even people who are considered the best physicists at a given time later become, maybe not obsolete, but they become in the end wrong. I think you should be really very bold and go ahead and try to find things on your own. Well, that's my opinion.
No, for me, science is not an intellectual exercise. It's what I really genuinely care about, like personally. It's not an exercise. It's what I really enjoy and what I really like doing. Maybe, if you want to abstract away the intellectual, let's say that we could solve all the physical problems very easily, without minimal technical effort. It would just come to us. But still, still I would do science. I'm not doing it for the intellectual challenge, so to say, because I really want to know. That's why I do science. I like unknown things. So the fact that science may appear like some giant ongoing quest greatly appeals to me. I like being surprised. I like discovering things which are not known yet. Actually, when I was a small kid, it has nothing to do with science actually. When I was a small kid, I really liked the stories, like how people discovered the world, when they first sailed over the Pacific Oceans and such things. And I always wished I could do that. Of course, we already know what the whole world looks like. You can look at it from satellite even. But science is somewhat similar in spirit. That you go somewhere, you have an idea or a problem, and you just chance it, and you go in that direction. And maybe you wind up somewhere interesting. Maybe not. Maybe you get lost on the Pacific. But no, it greatly appeals to me.
So I like it here. I like the fact that science is so complex. And in the end, there will never be the end, I think, of science, because suppose that finally we found the unification of gravity with other interactions. But I really doubt whether this will be the end. of the quest to understand how things work. Then of course we'll understand more, but this understanding will create many more questions. So there's never end to it. That's, I think, nature of reality, that it's endless, actually.
It's beautiful that you can never be certain. Once you have some theory, there is always possibility that somebody can ruin your theory and create something better. Another thing is that I think that basically everything is possible. A long time ago people thought that it's impossible to fly because laws of nature do not allow you to do this. Now we know that it's not a problem because there is another theory which tells you that flying in certain conditions is possible.
It is well known and experimentally proven that if you accept that the world is local, so if I do something now, it takes some time before information about this will reach somebody else, like you, for instance. Then the experiments showed that the results of the measurements that you observe in the laboratory did not exist before the act of the measurement. So to put it in a very philosophical terms, and this is exaggeration, it looks like in quantum mechanics that if you don't look at the moon, then you don't know whether it is there or not. So your act of looking would actually creates moon at a given position. So in this sense, what then is reality, right? Does it exist, or it is just basically created by the act of looking at it? But what this it is, probably nobody really knows. So I would say that, yeah, the question about reality is a very difficult question.
Whenever you had a family quarrel, you just know how different the same people, even within a family, feel reality. But it was like this, no, it was like that, I remember it clearly, no, it was the other way. So if we are not even able to agree, if two people are not able to agree on what reality is, one might as well ask if there is something like reality. Then when you are doing quantum mechanics, you are getting to the conclusion that there is no reality. So sometimes I think that reality is an illusion our brain gives ourselves to be able to deal with this strange world.
I think probably what surprises me most about quantum physics or quantum information, that quite often there have been problems where I was so sure that one thing would be true, but yet I find the counterexample. I mean, it's maybe a small moment of frustration, but usually you learn actually that there's some interesting effect which is just different from classical physics, or which just fools your intuition. So I think it's mostly these small examples that really surprise me. I don't think there's currently any other activity that can match physics in terms of this, as you put it, the thrill and the satisfaction involved. But of course that's very personal. And I could imagine that for most people that's probably not the case, but for me it is, at present.
Quantum mechanics is lacks of common sense. That's quite a widespread point of view within the community of physicists. Even Feynman said that nobody understands quantum mechanics. So yes, it's frustrating because sometimes it takes very long time to develop the intuition about physical systems that are described by quantum mechanics. That's one source of frustration. And the other one is that sometimes you basically attack some problem and you get stuck. So there's nothing you can do. You just try this angle, that angle, different approaches, but in the end you're just stuck and you can't move. And all the months of research it looks like they are wasted. And there are also these moments when you suddenly stop understanding anything. And apparently there are good moments, because I was told by Anton Zeilinger once that once you stop understanding things, then it is when you start to understand them. So apparently it's like that, but it can be very frustrating. But it's in the end it's a very positive frustration, because it motivates you to move on.
Yeah, it's frustrating to do science, that's for sure. There's no doubt about that. Every scientist will tell you the same story. It's frustrating because out of 100 or maybe even more ideas that you have, 99 or 99% of them are all rubbish, all failures in some sense. And it's frustrating because you thought you initially have the solution to some problems, but then you discover that you're still far away and you still do not understand.
First, you want to find something that no one else was able to find, and you have to believe all the time that you can find it. And the moment that you do find it, you have to question it with all the power you have, because you might have made a mistake and you have to question yourself, your own calculations. And so first you have this amount of frustration because you cannot find it. Then you have a tiny little bit of luck and fulfillment and you're feeling great. And then there was another period of frustration where you have to check your own model.
Doing science is a constant source of inspiration that I think makes life much more interesting, because I don't remember that I was ever bored in my life. Well, I mean, maybe when I was a teenager, but once I start to be aware of what I'm doing, then I was never bored. And there's always something, you can always think around things and find new problems to solve, or even to look at the same problems again from a different point of view, and suddenly you discover new options, new opportunities, and you suddenly even feel new flavor of the problem, something that you didn't see before. So it's just fantastic. I mean, I cannot imagine that I can live without science, really. So.
Just a minute,
Wherever convenient.
Yeah, he's okay, don't worry.
You see that there are sometimes limits to your ability to really comprehend nature. You try very hard and it just escapes the power of your intuition, of your mathematical tools. But at the same time, you deeply believe that they can be solved, that there is a simple solution. So that's what really drives us, a real belief that behind however complicated process, there must be a simple solution. Whether it really is the case, or is it just simply our purely aesthetical approach to doing science, so that we believe it has to be beautiful or simple in some sense, I don't know, but I do believe that there's a simple solution to complex problems. I find it absolutely amazing that there's no central authority of any type, that there's no like a set of rules and regulations, but somehow there's an emerging structure of verification of what is good, what is sensible, what makes sense. And that goes from generation to generation, and somehow it works. Our understanding of reality is like a road to infinity. Then we will probably gradually discover deeper and deeper layers of it. But at the very beginning, and that is probably now, so little it is known about it. It's amazing that at the very fundamental level, physics is extremely successful, of course. It's in our power of explanation is amazing. But even today, physicists debate whether what we discover is really part of reality, or is it just part of our perceptions? Is it all about our perceptions, the way we perceive things? This is the only thing we can say?
I myself am very paradoxical about everything. I'm not very coherent, as a matter of fact. So I think that I am in tune with this paradox of quantum mechanics, and this is what actually fascinates me. There's this widespread approach to quantum mechanics where you don't ask questions, you just shut up and calculate. All right, and you sort of forget about paradoxes, forget about these things that are very counterintuitive and they are crazy actually, because quantum mechanics is madness. So some people forget about it and just go on, they calculate, some atomic spectra, and they get satisfaction from this one. But many people just question quantum mechanics, and they like these paradoxes and the fact that it is absolutely crazy. One of them was Feynman. So in my case, yes, it helps to be paradoxical, if it comes to my character, but also know people who are excellent scientists, excellent quantum mechanics or quantum engineers, which are very organized, they are very focused, and still they work on quantum paradoxes. So they are not paradoxical, but they still do it, and they do it very well. So I think it depends on personality. But the cool thing about doing science is that you meet people who are absolutely crazy, all right, and you would never meet them anywhere else. You go for a conference and some of them are really absolutely mad, and that's cool. That's what I like.